Can you hear me? Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much. It's definitely on. How's it going, everybody? My name is Jim Carroll. Welcome along to the second panel today in this room at Hard Work Class Heroes 2013. I'm joined by four eminent explorers of the Venn diagram between bands and brands. And so for the next 45 minutes, they will be your kind of map makers and tell you exactly what's going on in that particular space. On my right, Robert. Next to him, Paul, Hazel, and Chewy. So we're going to start basically by asking each one of these people to explain a little bit about themselves, who they work for, and what they currently do. Starting again with Chewy.
Hello everyone, Chewy's the name. It's not my real name, but I was.
Is that not your real name?
No, believe it or not, it's not what my parents called me. But my friends were avid Star Wars fans, and I had hairy legs from a young age, and it's just stuck. I work for a company called Think House. We're based not far from here, and I've been there for about 5 years. And predominantly I've been working on music projects. So worked with Heineken for a lot of that time on stuff like Oxygen and Electric Picnic and Heineken as Green Spheres and Live Project as it is now. But in the company we do all sorts of stuff from general sort of PR, so traditional stuff, a lot of social media. We've video teams and we've designers and developers as well. So we do all sorts of making apps for Facebook or for smartphones, to sending out press releases to the likes of Jim, which I'm sure he loves to receive.
I used to meet him, Chewy. No, that's not true. I read him. I spell check him as well. Thanks very much, Chewy. Hazel?
Hi folks, my name's Hazel. I head the communications for Diageo. Previous to that, I was actually in this building working for NDRC. So I worked with a lot of startups. For 6 years before that, I worked for the Electric Picnic, dealing directly with all the bands and acts. So all the way through, I was working on the marketing and comm side of things. So just kind of seeing where bands were coming from, and from the startup side in the last year, seeing how the marketing aspect and the comms aspect can benefit them. So.
Can you hear me? Paul?
Yep.
Hi folks, my name is Paul. I work at a startup called Intercom, which is a marketing and communications platform. Before that, about 4 months ago, up until now, I worked at Facebook. I basically led design projects for global brands, all of whom seems to want to do music projects. Worked in Spotify and Coke and some stuff. Before that I worked at Google, worked on Gmail and YouTube, did a lot of stuff around understanding the role music plays in YouTube while I worked there as well.
Tell us a little bit about Intercom. It's the startup.
Basically we're building a platform to connect web businesses with their customers. It's a pretty broad communications platform, but basically, if you own a real life business today, like a shop or whatever, you talk to customers every day, you start to learn what they like, what they don't like, their behaviors and so on. We're basically building a platform so web businesses can do that.
Great. Thank you very much. Robert?
Yeah, it's Robert Quirk. I'm CEO of Action Media. Spent the last 15 years working predominantly in digital marketing, working across a number of industries with a number of brands. And Action Media now specialise in big ticket, experiential and sponsorship solutions. So think of the likes of two big brands like the GAA and Aircom, and combining those two organisations together to create a marketing solution.
Okay, so who will be the clients that Action Media work with? GAA, Aircom?
So the clients I'm working with at the moment are the New Year's Eve Festival. So as you know, Ireland is trying to be put on the map as having one of the world's best New Year's Eve festivals, so that Tourism Ireland can broadcast this footage around the world. So I would work with that festival to try and bring in brands to fund and sponsor that event. I've also worked on a number of TV documentaries. There's a Santa Sports documentary coming out in November, who I bring brands in to power that. And also the Hard Work Class Heroes Festival as well. So we're looking at developing opportunities for 2014 as well. So we bring brands in to align with events and festivals like this. We then help fund, but also support and develop.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so as you can hear from that, we have a fairly kind of broad and deep range of experience around the table, mostly from the brand side. So in that case, I'm going to act sort of as devil's advocate and say I'm representing the bands of Ireland. So as a representative of the bands of Ireland, at what stage, basically, Chewy, do you reckon brands start approaching bands? Do you think brands start approaching bands too early, or do you think brands start approaching brands at the right particular time?
Do you mean too early in the band's career?
Yeah.
No, I don't think any. I'm not sure if there is a too early. I think if the band is ready, then they're ready. You know what I mean? And I also think that what's happening a lot now.
That's just Twitter.
Okay. I think what's happening a lot now is that you'll find certainly new bands are doing a lot of the approaching, if you know what I mean. So a lot of bands these days are clued in enough to know that there are benefits to be found with working with brands, and they go looking for them themselves. Not all, obviously, and if you're not that way inclined, you're not that way inclined. But there's in the last couple of years, not just from working with big brands, but from knowing people who work, especially in the likes of syncing and stuff like that. So trying to get tracks put with TV commercials. We've been cold, you know what I mean? Just have bands rather sending in tracks saying, do you know anyone who could get this track heard and stuff? So that's.
Paul, Paul, do you think like the feeling among bands basically is sometimes a little bit old-fashioned, or is it a case that's changing in terms of when they talk about getting involved with a brand, they're still thinking about money, they're still thinking about cold hard cash rather than other opportunities. Is this something that brands are trying to change?
I think it is changing. I'd like to think it's changing. I think the most clued in, I guess as Stu just said, the most clued in new bands are approaching brands that I guess have the same set of values. So not every brand, not every band are a good match. There are some brands and some bands that are probably a terrible match. But I think as long as a band believes in a brand and vice versa, I guess to the other question, it's never too early. And I'd like to think that a lot of the younger bands in particular kind of understand that more natively probably than people my age.
Yeah, I was going to say it's also very important what's the nature of the partnership. So does the brand want to run an event with your band, or do they just want to use your music as a backing for a TV ad? And just going back to the first question, that will really determine whether it's too early or not to approach a brand with your music. So if you have a new piece of music which hadn't never been heard before, and you're trying to amplify that across a fan base, then yes, it's a great way to do that, by trying to approach a brand and have that as a backing for a TV ad. But if you're trying to run some gigs or run some events with a brand, they might not look at you because you're not well established enough, and you wouldn't have the fan base established, which would give them that amplification across that demographic. So it really depends on what's the nature of the partnership.
Yeah. This is a question for Hazel and Chewy, because you both represent, I suppose, kind of like the alcohol drinks sector of the market. Do you work with third parties? Do you work with, are there certain third parties you will always work with in terms of putting on events and taking approaches with them in terms of bands? And should bands be looking more to getting involved with those third parties or directly approaching you?
We do. I know at Diageo we do, definitely. We do work with different agencies because for us, we really want to make sure we have our ear on the ground in relation to what good talent is out there and opportunities that are out there as well. So there are different various agencies we work with, from big to small, and they tend to feed back information to us. So I've noticed on the flip side of the coin, even working for the picnic, that's actually a good place to be, where you have agencies sourcing out people for you as well. So bands feel that instead of approaching a big corporation, it's easier to approach an agency and actually speak to them that way.
I would have worked with a couple of third parties, the likes of MCG or the Pod and those kind of some of the big ones, for sure, and I think a combination. There's people who would work within agencies, whether they're agencies like the one I work in or ad agencies, who would also specialize in finding talent, whether that's for a large scale event or for syncing or something like that as well. So a combination, I guess. But I do think it is. I know just the amount of people in bands who would say, can you get us a gig at a Heineken Green Spears event or something like that. It's not as simple as me going to Heineken and saying, can you make this happen? There's a chain that goes up, and there's bookers involved and stuff like that as well. Sometimes there's deals that you don't know about that go on in the background as well between say the client and the booking agency and the booking agency might have deals going on with certain agents as well. So there are lots of variables that go on in the background, which I'm not privy to, and certainly the bands will be privy to too.
I suppose, Chewie, kind of follow-up question there is, does it frustrate you sometimes when you have an idea for an event and you kind of think to yourself, okay, band X, Y, and Z are the bands I really want for this, and instead the booking agents or the venue owner says, well, actually, no, I want band F and G. I mean, at the end of the day, who's got the ultimate power? Is it the booking agent? Is it the venue? Or is it the actual brand because they're paying the money?
It's usually not the venue anyway, so you can kind of discount them. They'll take whatever's going. They're happy to get a full venue. It's sort of split really. The booking agent does have a hell of a lot of power, but the brand manager and the team that works with them, so the different agencies that work with the brand, would have a lot of say. So it could be a case where they go in with a long list at the beginning of the year and say, this is our dream list, and the booking agent can say, well, actually we can fulfill, half of those. We can't fulfill the other half, which would be a pretty good result as well. It hasn't really come up where we've ever suggested a band and that we really, really wanted and it hasn't worked out. I don't think anything is impossible, especially in the last couple of years, as most people probably know, it's something like the Electric Picnic, say, and deals going on between Live Nation and the Pod. The days where acts were very much one or the other, your MCD, you couldn't be booked by the Pod, all this kind of stuff. That's not really the case so much anymore. So it's a bit more of an open field nowadays, I think.
Okay. So let's start this question, I suppose, at the top of the table and work its way down. And that's, I suppose, the more general question about, the whole interface between bands and brands. I mean, years ago, it seemed to be the case that if a brand wants to get involved with bands, they would pay. They would get out one of those novelty-sized huge checkbooks, have loads of zeros at the end, and hand it over, and the job's also. Now it just seems that brands have got a lot, to my mind anyway, to a lot of bands as well, have got a lot more savvy and a lot more demanding, I suppose is the word. Have you noticed the kind of power balance changing? And like we say, Paul, have you noticed kind of like brands exerting and flexing their muscles more in terms of what they want from a relationship like that?
I'm not sure about the latter part of it. It does, from an outsider looking in, I'm not a musician. I don't work in the music industry. I worked in the periphery for a bunch of different companies. From a I guess, naive outsider looking in, it seems to me that a lot of the economics are broken. It's very inefficient. I think it seems like there's tons and tons of middlemen who don't really do anything other than not let people talk to other people. And I'd like to think that that's going to change pretty dramatically. Without going on too much of a radical tangent, I think people forget that in music in particular, that the internet is very young. It's 20 years old, so it's incredibly young for media technology. The internet will bring about changes to society that we haven't seen in hundreds of years, and it's at its infancy. So it seems to me that the younger generations of people, people who are now kind of starting to enter their 20s, were born with the internet, will think about things in an entirely different way than we do, and certainly older people in the music industry do. And I think we're actually going to see completely different models. I think we might see, we're already starting to see it, I think, with a lot of the music TV shows, but I think we'll start to see things where brands invent bands, legitimate bands that are cool, so I think, again, I think that's changing quite a lot. And, I think we'll see even more radical change. I think the disruption to the music industry that we've seen so far is actually only the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Well, I was at a recent Google Think event, and it was a great event. It was very, very informative. But during the breakout sessions, they had a house band playing, during the intervals and so on. But the house band was a virtual band that was created from some members from Basement Jaxx and some other artists as well. So that was a band which was put together by Google to perform music, and that's a really good example of that. But to answer your question, Jim, do brands still, write those $1 million checks to align with bands? And the answer is absolutely yes, they do. But it very much depends on the brand itself and how they work as a business. So you'll have some companies, some brands who will have brand managers who are so tuned into what's happening in the music industry that they know who they want to work with. Other brand managers in large organizations, they completely rely on their ad agency. So they will set a budget every year and say, okay, look, we have 20 million to spend this year, and what are we going to do? And their ad agency will go off, or the creative agency will go off and come up with a strategy for them, which is going to win. So they might, shoot some TV footage, a really, really nice TV ad, but they could have 5 different tracks playing along that. So they will select music which would they think captures the emotion or the feeling of that particular ad campaign, and then the brand manager can feel involved. Oh, I like the third one, so they feel involved in the selection process. So the ad agencies really have a lot of control over what bands are being brought to the agencies, to the brands for use in advertising campaigns. And so, the power of the ad agency has to be considered by bands. So instead of picking up the phone to Vodafone and saying, "Hi Vodafone, we really have an exciting piece of music. Would you like to have that included in your next TV campaign?" A better source to go to could be their ad agency and talk to them about your band, the followers you have, and the fans you have, and the type of demographic of your fan base, and sell that in pure media terms to the ad agency, because that makes their job easier when recommending you to the brand.
Have you any thoughts on that particular point, Hugh?
Just something that popped into my head there. I didn't ever watch that show Nashville. It's quite terrible. But I was watching it one day, and there's a country and western singer, and I think she was going through a bit of a rough patch, much like Sinead O'Connor seems to think that Miley's going through. And she turned herself around when she went into the office of a large telecommunications company, and they were surprised that she came in herself, first of all, and she wasn't hungover or whatever. But she came in and she listed off all the stuff that Robert just talked about. So the demographic of her fan base, how many Twitter followers she has, how many Facebook fans, how many YouTube video clips her last video got, and so on. And this was her selling herself, and she managed to get herself the big fat check. It's those sort of stats that a lot of the suits or whatever you want to call them will see and go, oh great. And so those big deals are still being done. I got a bit distracted in my head when I was thinking about that Nashville thing. I forgot the other part of the question. Paul, what were you saying about
Inventing bands, virtual bands.
Yeah, it wasn't that.
Okay, one thing, I have another question, I suppose. This is for you, Hazel. Just looking at some of the recent activities that the Agio have been involved in, you do this coming back, you've got the answer prepared. I mean, I'm fascinated. I suppose I'm not so much fascinated by Artist Day. Don't worry about that. I'm more fascinated by the Art of Guinness Project's idea, and maybe you can kind of talk people through the genesis of that one.
Well, with the project itself, it's sprung out of the Art of Guinness Fund, which was a fund for social entrepreneurs. From that, the brand managers and also marketing and different groups in Diageo, which are, well, listen, there's where it's being tweeted about.
The Twitter feed is unreal.
Yeah.
It's
It's your fault,
Thank you very much. Okay, continue. The Twitter is now turned off.
Watching monthly.
Twitter is now turned off.
but there's 4 distinct categories that we decided to delve into. So we have.
But just quick question, Hazel. Where did the idea come from? Was this a London-based agency idea, or did it come from?
No, actually, funny enough, I know people will go, oh, this is coming from corporate HQ somewhere in London. It actually came from what we thought was needed in Ireland at the time. Because if you look at Ireland since 2008, since recession hit us, people have got a lot more creative. You look at my own family, in fairness, my brother decided to go down to animation instead of be a doctor like my mother wants him to. So, but that's the thing, people have taken to creative route, have delved a little deeper into themselves, and for us as a company, we wanted to change things. We wanted to see where were communities going, what kind of I guess, inspiration would they need, or have they been bringing forward? And we found 4 distinct categories then: the sports, the arts, the culture, and food, which was getting bigger and bigger.
I suppose my question would be where did the idea come from to get all the people who wanted to be involved doing your free PR?
Well, don't hate me for this, but a lot of people in this building can be asked that question, because you have the likes of Gigstarter, the likes of I think Farkpfizer. A lot of the startups that I worked with have gone down to apply for Art of Guinness projects as well, because they see it as, well, a chance for funding, but a chance to market market themselves as well. And I know a lot of people have said, well, this is Diageo getting free marketing. But if you look at the other side, this is also the bands, the people, the applicants getting traction for themselves, for their product, for what they believe in. And I've had quite a few people respond with exactly that, which is, listen, we didn't get the funding, but we were happy that we were part of the process because we managed to get X, Y, Z for.
Well, don't get me wrong. I mean, I totally. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, the marketing campaign of the year was Arctic Guinness Project's getting free marketing all around. That was it's great. But I was just fascinated by, like, I mean, what kind of meetings were involved? Did you actually think it was going to take off to that particular extent? That all like loads and loads, hundreds, thousands of cultural and arts organisations were going to just do your PR for you?
Did we envision, did we expect that this would happen? Where we started from was to start a campaign that we can transition the Arctic Guinness Fund to the Arctic Guinness Project. Did we see what will happen in relation to marketing? Did we expect it? Well, no. Did we think that it was a great thing? Yes, because there was appetite for it. At the end of the day, people got on board, and we were very proud of it.
Cool. Yeah, rather than turn this into kind of like, I mean, I don't want to kind of totally focus on this, but Sherry, I mean, speaking of, like, I mean, Tinkhouses are a fairly well-regarded agency around town, full of bright ideas, you know, full of really smart people, but some of them. Like, I mean, there's some really good people there. What was your reaction? What's the general reaction of agencies around town to HEP and how it went? Were everyone kicking themselves going, why the fuck didn't we think of something like this?
I'd say there was a bit of that, yeah. I mean, there's no denying that if you were working in marketing, it's kind of gold, really, isn't it? You've got everyone going around doing your marketing for you, and it's got goodwill attached. Now, obviously, we also saw some negativity around it as well, but mostly goodwill. So yeah, I mean, I'd say, yeah, anyone who was involved in marketing, just from regardless of. Maybe some people did, I'm not sure, maybe if you might have had a personal sort of stance that sort of said, okay, someone's been taken advantage of, but in marketing terms, you couldn't deny that it was a great idea.
Right. I want to go back to kind of Paul and what you were talking about earlier on there about, like, I mean, changes, I suppose, in the marketplace. We talk about virtual bands and things like that. When you hear about an idea like the Arctic Guinness projects and you look at that and you kind of weigh it up with all your different hats on as a brand manager, as kind of like someone who's interested in music, as someone who's interested in kind of innovation as well. I mean, do you think, you know, that something like that is in some way exploitative, or is it the case that people knew exactly what they were signing up for?
I don't think it's exploitative at all. I think people overcomplicate all of these things. You know, to me, it's actually fairly straightforward. You know, brands, people who run brands have a set of values. They do their best to make sure that the perceptions of a brand are of one set of values and not another set of values. It's pretty that simple. And bands are exactly the same. Like I said earlier, some bands will want to associate themselves with that set of values, and some won't. I think people are happy to participate in these things. You know, I actually think if there is exploitation in the music industry, it's probably like all of the things that are happening in the middle. It's actually not the brands. It's not actually people who have money, and it's not the bands. You know, these things are basically the inverse of each other. And maybe this is oversimplifying it, but a brand probably has a lot of money and is looking for authenticity and credibility with specific types of people. And you know, the band is the opposite. It has all the credibility and all the authenticity most of the time, and no money. And any project that basically marries those two, like, is, I think, good all around. I think people who enter into these things enter into them in good faith. People who run them in good faith. So I don't think I actually wish there was a lot more of that kind of thing.
Like, Robert, from your kind of point of view, maybe you mentioned earlier on one of the projects you're working on at the moment was the New Year's Eve concert in Dublin. Maybe you could like talk us through, like, I mean, I suppose a meeting around that. I mean, are you talking about, when you're involved there, are you talking about bringing brands in? Are you talking about sponsors? And, like, I mean, maybe just kind of like talk something like that, and also kind of talk about, do you have any kind of say or input into what bands will be playing this, or is that a decision that's been taken by Jim Davis and the promoters, or by Paul Davis and the promoters?
Okay, so I think the bands who are playing there, to cover that off, you have to have a headline act, a top act, so that's going to be taken care of by, you know, the organisers and Paul Davis, because he has those contacts. But then if you look at, okay, so a brand wants to come on board, and the headline act may not be in line with that brand's demographic, and it's, well, actually, no, we're not going to sponsor you because we have a much younger demographic, but we're trying to target an 18 to 25-year-old demographic from a pure brand perspective, okay? But, so in that case then, you know, it's in the festival organizer's interest to bring in a brand which matches or is in line with the brand's target demographic, okay? So in that sense, yes, we will, you know, you could recommend brands or bands to come in and play. An example of that is we were talking about Hard Working Class Heroes, and maybe extend that out into New Year's Eve Festival, so there's an unsigned element to that festival. Because some brands are interested in unsigned acts because they like to be seen as innovators, or, you know, with very much in touch with what's happening on the ground. Okay, so from that point on then, you know, looking at, you know, bringing a brand in to sponsor the event, you're talking about, you know, a 12 to 18 month lead time for that. So if you're a band and you have a fantastic single and you think it's going to be great for you know, O2's, you know, Christmas campaign this year, well, you can pretty much forget about it, because that would have been selected 12 months ago, a year in advance. So when we're talking about, you know, this year's New Year's Eve Festival, you know, all those conversations would have started, you know, 12 months ago, if not more. So, you know, talking about, you know, getting a band at a festival like New Year's Eve, along with a brand, the brand can help bring you in if they're interested in an unsigned or an upcoming band, or you match a demographic. And the New Year's Eve organisers, so the event organisers themselves, will be interested to bring you in as a band if that complements the conversations they're having with the sponsors. Okay, so that can work both ways. More often than not, 9 times out of 10, again, those conversations happen in the ad agencies. So, you know, we're going to the ad agencies to promote New Year's Eve as a property, so that brands would come in to sponsor that festival. So, again, just I can't say enough how influential the ad agencies are in that process.
Okay. I suppose one of the most biggest brands around right now is probably Facebook. And you work there. I mean, Facebook is one of those kind of brands that's been quite, I suppose cool is the wrong word, selective when it comes to music as well. Was there any kind of like thought process within the company about that, or was something that just happened very organically?
You say selective, what do you mean?
Selective, like in terms of like getting involved in music ideas. I think about times when there was the buildings open in Dublin, getting bands in there, and just kind of like moving into that music space. It seemed to be quite selective about getting involved.
Yeah, I think it's probably mostly a philosophical thing. You know, if you, you know, I worked in the product team. So in the team, you know, I'm a designer, product manager. I worked in the teams building product. So working closely with the leadership, some of the leadership of the company. And you know, you get a very strong sense that it's actually, it's really down to the philosophy of the company, which is to be effectively neutral. You know, what Facebook are trying to do is effectively build infrastructure, and that's why, you know, Facebook looks very utilitarian, and it's very intentional, because when you use Facebook, you shouldn't notice Facebook. You should notice your friends and their photos and things they write, etc. And I think that philosophy basically permeates throughout the whole company. I don't know specifically about the things that happen in Dublin, or whether, you know, but I'd imagine certainly that culture, that philosophy has to permeate down.
Sure, from your point of view, I mean, suppose these are kind of like the negative side of things. Well, how does a brand react when things go wrong? Like, I mean, when a band turns out to be the wrong fit, or when a band kind of acts up. I mean, like, where does the blame report begin, and where does it end?
There's not really much you can do, really, to be honest. I mean, it would completely depend on how much acting up is. You know, there's a broad spectrum there. But there's really not much you can do. You're dealing with artists at the end of the day, you know. I mean, it's sometimes the artists will roll into town. Sometimes they may not even be told that it's that they're working with the brand. Again, when you're working with third parties, that can happen, not all the time, but they could be booked on the back of, you know, 7 other dates with the same booking agent. One of them happens to be a brand sponsored show. The act hears of it is when he walks out on stage, and there's branding around the place. But even then, they might not really get the extent that it was like that. So
that's a very good point, because I know some people who work in sports sponsorship as well, and when they start working in music, I mean, they kind of feel like music industry needs to get its head examined, because they'll contrast something that they're doing an event with something like Rio Ferdinand, for example. Rio Ferdinand has an hour put aside every fortnight to work with his brands, and that means he's picked up at 9 o'clock at Mary Knight's training ground, and he has to be back by 10 o'clock. But during that hour, if you want Rio Ferdinand to stand his head with your product in his mouth, he'll do it for you, because he's on contract. So when these kind of, I suppose what I'm wondering is, how do the brands react when they, on one hand, they used to deal with kind of sports stars. I mean, you know, someone like Red Bull will tell you about working with like Joe Canning or Brendan Brogan, how good it is. And then you kind of come to the music side of it, and it's a lot more, how do I put this very politely, unstructured, I suppose. How like, do brands understand this, or do they ever kind of get really angsty and say to the middle people like Think House or whatever, can you just sort this out, or get us a band who are compliant, get us that nice Brezzy chap?
Yeah. I guess if you were worried, if you were that worried, if you'd done a bit of a, you know, what would you call, like a crisis plan or something like that, then you're probably booking the wrong act. You know what I mean? If there's a danger that the person is going to do something horrific on stage, I'm not going to think of any examples. I don't know, bite a bat's head off or something like that.
Or smash up the brand's logo and the brand's
yeah, something like that. Something like that. Yes, if there's a danger that that's going to happen, then the advisors, whether that's an agent or the brand manager or the booking agent will probably be the last person to tell you though. If there's a danger something that's going to happen, then just you shouldn't be booking the act. Now, it's working with Heineken. I mean, we've been very fortunate that we've been able to book. Every act that we booked, we've never had something like that, and it's not like we've never crossed anyone off. Put it that way, we've never crossed anyone off because we thought they were going to do something terrible, you know. So it shouldn't come up. If it did come up, you would deal with it the same way you deal with any crisis. You just put a plan together, get it in social media, and deal with it. Yeah.
Okay. I suppose to kind of to round off, maybe starting with kind of Hazel. You know, give us an example of kind of like a music sponsor, a music brand interface, a music brand program that you really admire, not your own though. I mean, just not your own, and preferably not Red Bull either, because you're all going to mention Red Bull at some stage. We know how good and how kind of, I suppose, wide Red Bull are. But any other kind of ideas to come to mind of kind of like, I suppose, innovative music branding, music sponsorship programs? If you thought, yeah, I'd like to do that.
I quite like Heineken, mainly, and I probably shouldn't say that in my capacity, to be honest with you, but I have family who lives in Hong Kong, and every time I go back to Hong Kong, their scene changes quite rapidly with music. They actually have what, as Paul described, as brands actually sponsoring startup bands, and that is a space I would like us to get to in Ireland, especially with the bigger brands, to be able to kind of pick out different bands in the community and be able to nurture them, be able to guide them in relation to support and mentoring, and not just the branding and the big bucks. Of course, that's nice too, but the way they do it over in the likes of Hong Kong is quite good. They do provide mentoring and support, and we are talking about every brand from Coke to Nissan to actually there was tobacco in there as well, but they took them out. So,
do you think Western audiences would be fairly amenable to that now? Do you think, you know, the old school resistance is selling out to brands is gone? Is that gone, or is that still there? I mean, I don't mean among writers, critics, or people in the industry, but I mean the general punters. There seems to be just a comparison between the Western and Eastern attitudes to brand.
yeah, well, that's the thing. I think at the end of the day, I have quite a few friends who are part of bands. And they would always say, no, I don't want to sell out, I don't want to kind of sell to a brand. But ultimately, you then kind of ask them, well, do you want to go play for the likes of Electric Picnic or Oxygen or any festival? And they go, yeah, that sounds deadly. And then you tell them, well, these are brands. These music festivals have become brands themselves. So unless you want to be in a corner playing to your grandmother, you better actually decide to get on board and have some element where you want to sell out a bit. Well, if you don't want to go full off, so be it, but you do have to understand it's a business at the end of the day.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think the best example is OK Go. Just to preface that, like, I think that this whole notion of, like, you know, bands going crazy and people saying they sell out, like, I think that's actually, I'd say, like, the going crazy part is actually just being unprofessional, you know, and I think the music industry has a lot to learn from lots of other industries about this. But I think the general, I would say, like, the general model of a band who get it, or OK Go, you know, people give out about OK Go, they say that, they made these like viral videos, but the music's crap, you know, they're only famous because of their videos, etc., etc. You know, their most recent video, I think it was for the last single, was with Chevy, in the US car manufacturer. And it's amazing, I don't know if you guys have seen this video, but, you know, basically, it's very clear that Chevy, OK Go, and Chevy's creative agency, creative advertising agency, sat down together and invented this together. You know, they're inside a Chevy. It's got robots, and they're basically performing in the Chevy. The whole thing is scripted. It's incredibly good, and you know, it got a really positive reception. I think most of the critics who wrote about it said that actually this is how you do it properly, and it's additive. You know, Chevy added to the video, to the song, to the whole creative and artistic act. And you know, to not quote Red Bull, I think OK Go and what they're doing, they get it. I think they're a model of like the band of the future, if you like.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, another very innovative way for a band to obtain sponsorship or funding through branding is just by using technology and platforms. So a platform like Vevo.com, for example, Vevo music video website, who are owned by the labels Sony and Universal, plus another 35 smaller labels combined. So they would have playlists created automatically on that platform, say for particular genres of music or new releases or Irish music, and they would also then create their own content under, I think they call it Lift, so a Vevo Lift, so they'd interview a new artist and basically give them a lift. So what I'm saying is, okay, because brands would specifically sponsor new artists like that or content online. So you're using this platform, Vevo, to promote your brand or to promote your music. And then also this platform will go off and get sponsorship for you, which you will get a percentage of. So so bands can also use this platform as an amplification tool to try and get sponsorship revenue, as well as going directly to the brand themselves. So there's a number of ways that you can do that as a band.
Okay. Chewy, what would you give as an example of a fairly innovative music brand's hookup that you're not involved with?
I would say anything that anyone who sticks with it, so any brand that does something and sticks at it for a few years. So the most obvious one is the one you told us not to mention, the Red Bull, like the Music Academy, just something that goes on for years.
I mean, okay, so I mean, you've all been very good and I've mentioned the Red Bull Music Academy now, but let's actually, because it's an amazing, to my mind, example of how an actual brand can get involved in music and work it so successfully. I mean, I don't know, but the rest of you, the thing that I admire most about the Red Bull Music Academy is that it's usually very hard to find out what artists they've worked with in the past. They keep that on the down low. It's all about like who they're working with right now. When you go through their past roster, it's like a who's who of electronic music right now.
Yeah, I mean, they've done some amazing stuff, and there's a few you can. I've only heard kind of through people who've been there about some of the stuff. Like a friend of mine was there this year, and he was in the studio with James Murphy and stuff like that. But I mean, I wouldn't have found that out unless he told me. But that's one of the reasons, like I said, I like them so much is because they've stuck at it. I think a lot of brands jump on a year to year and stuff like that, or they might just go in and try something out for a year, and it doesn't really benefit anyone in that instance, I think. I've seen some one-off, really fun things as well, though, that have been very beneficial for both parties. Interesting, real fun, weird things like Coca-Cola did a thing in Brazil where you had to tweet to get the band to come down and stuff like that. Just fun kind of things that just, I think it was a pop band, and if you were a big Coca-Cola fan and you were a pop fan, this would have blown your mind, I'm sure. That might not do much for people in this room maybe, but it was pretty fun. I just kind of want to change the subject a little bit, because I think we've been very talking about what brands can get from bands. That's what I kind of feel anyway. But there's lots of people here who are in bands who are wondering what they can get from brands. Or is it's mostly kind of brandy people here?
That's good. It's mostly silent people, I think. Yeah. I think this could be a good point. Actually, that'd be a good point to actually turn around to the floor. Well, any questions? We've got a microphone here now. If you just put your hand up when we get you.
Don't be shy. But I mean,
while we're on that kind of thing, yeah. I mean, like like we know what brands are looking for. You know what I mean? But often it's a case of what bands are after changes as a band's career goes on. Like you talked there, like Hazel, you talked there about like, I mean, I think it'd be great if a brand got involved with a band at a really, really young stage. But sometimes people in the industry will be kind of going, because the balance of power is kind of like more towards the band than the brand. We all know, that there's still situations where brands pay out huge, big checks to someone like Jay-Z or Kanye West to play the American Express night at South by Southwest, and that still happens. It just strikes me that it's very interesting that, like, what exactly does a band want from a brand? And that must change as the band's career goes on.
Well, I just was going to say as well that if you are in a band, and no one said they are, but if you are in a band and you're thinking about about hooking up with a brand or something like that, to think about what opportunities that they might offer, and that could be some of the stuff we talked about today. But if you have any ideas, don't be shy about putting them forward as well. Not necessarily to this panel, but to whether it's a brand manager or an agency, like Robert said, ad agencies and stuff like that, because you just don't know what's out there. And you could be a young creative person in a band and have loads of ideas. It could be a platform, like Paula said. It could be anything. And a brand might be the kind of person. At the end of the day, these guys do have money. They have marketing budgets that need to be spent. So don't be afraid to think beyond the obvious, like playing at a branded gig in the academy, or having a song played in an ad or something like that. There's lots of innovative people not just in the brands themselves, but in agencies like the one I work in, but like lots of other ones in Dublin, and they'd love to hear the ideas too. Sometimes it can be hard to get your foot in the door, but once you're there, if you meet the right person, you never know what will come of it. So you're all being very quiet now, but I'm sure there's
just on that, like, it's in the brand's interest to make that relationship work as well.
They'd love it. They'd love it.
Right, so the brand is going to, like, that person who's made a decision to say, yeah, this is the music we're going to work with, or this is the band we're going to work with. It's in that person's personal interest to make sure that relationship works. So that brand is going to get behind you as a band, and and amplify what you're doing, across their own social channels, across their own industry events as well. So this brand is going to help the band also by amplifying, because they want the relationship to work as well.
I think, Jim, I might, if no one's going to ask any questions, give a bit of feedback of the feedback we get in the office about bands and brands. There's three main ones. One is, if bands are looking to get in bed with brands, they only want one thing, and that is investment or money to get from where they are A to either B, C, or D. So B is a demo, C is an album, D is a tour, or A could be gear, and B could be a demo, and C. You know what I mean? So it's usually if bands. So this is before they're getting involved in activities like the festivals that are sponsored.
I suppose the question, just a question for, I suppose, the other people here have, that would be, I'm just reading everyone's mind here, is that, do the bands realise what the brands want at that stage?
That was part of the question, which is, so I suppose one of the things at FMT that we suggest to brands who come to us for ideas is bursaries, or if you really do want to help, and I think there's a confusion or maybe a naivety. It's difficult to read sometimes, but what exactly, I think there's a space where brand or sponsorship is a dirty word. And the bands, I think, are very cognizant of that, and they're very wary of it. And I think there's a lack of imagination generally in Ireland with brands around genuinely getting involved in a sector and coming up with and matching ideas or supporting ideas that are out in the sector that benefit bands directly. And I don't know if I'm speaking up for, I'm just speaking from repetition of what we've been hearing. And I think, if the relationship has to work both ways, then it has to work both ways. You have to respect that the person is coming to you out of need, not out of want. And that their creativity and their music is what is their blood and guts. They need you to help bridge the gap at the new gear change moments, but I suppose a lot of the time the confusion or the fear is about the lack of understanding that they don't want to sell you their soul to get that demo. So I think there is a happy medium, but am I...
This is like a scene from Oklahoma, will the cowman and the farmer ever be friends? Yeah, but like you said something. You I suppose, like Angela, you said something there, and they're kind of words that bands would actually, I suppose, resonate with bands. You're kind of saying they're coming from bands from more of need than want, and they want to help with creativity. But like brands are commercial entities, and you said something earlier on, Hazel, as well. You said, like, I think you, Hazel, said it's a business. And sometimes, bands need to get their business head on very, very fast, and more now.
I'm gonna just interject there, Jim. It is a business, but I can tell you that within the business, there is that creativity. I know a lot of people find it hard to wrap their heads around that idea. But if you look at my background, there is nothing on my background that would. No.
I'm not saying that, Hazel. It's like I understand completely. They're very creative people at brands, but at the same time, what comes first is it's a business.
It is, but equally they also know that there has to be that creative element. They would not just go, right, because of the bottom line, we can't use X, Y, Z. They don't go to that step. What they do is they do try, and there are a lot of middle people involved as well. Let's be honest about it, that one. They try to get everyone in line, and they try to find out what is best for the business, but also what is best to try to push said artist or said band out. Because if that person, let's just say if you put a band or artist in the corner and they don't like to do what they want, you're not going to get any return for your business either. And that's being quite honest, because at the end of the day, they could, well, throw a tantrum or not fulfill their contract. All these things can happen, which damage your brand ultimately. And being a business, they're smart enough to know this.
And just, every brand, every company operates and works in a slightly different way. Okay, so every brand or brand manager or marketing department in that company speaks a slightly different language and has a different way of achieving their goals internally. So for the best way for a band to approach these people is to understand how they communicate and understand how they go about achieving their goals. And one of the best ways to do that is try to obtain the company's marketing brief. So what is your brief for 2014? Which demographic are you trying to go after? What's your company messaging? And then the band, can work together to produce music which is in line with that brand's goals, and not specifically just for that one goal, but if they're trying to talk to that brand, they need to talk to them in a way that they understand. And there's no point to come with an approach which is completely separate to where the brand wants to go next year. So there has to be a meeting in the middle or somewhere.
Yeah, I suppose I'll offer you a completely alternative perspective. Going back to what I said earlier, the internet, it's a very, very new invention, despite what people think. If you look at most media technologies, when they were invented, telephone, TV, telegram, printing press, all of them took many decades to stabilize. And the same, this is basically me channeling Marshall McLuhan. This is not really necessarily the original thought. The same thing happens basically every time new technology is invented, which is that people look at the existing technologies and the existing ways of doing things, and they apply them to the new thing, right? And McLuhan says this is basically walking backwards into the future. And this is exactly what's happening in music, exactly what's happening across a lot of industries. But, if you're a band and you're sitting at home going like, we need a demo, then we need to get in the studio and make an album, then we need a tour. This is thinking about today's kind of past technologies and trying to apply them to a completely new ecosystem and a completely new thing. And it's kind of ironic in a way that many bands will complain about dirtying their artistic whatever values or purity, and it's funny because these a lot of artists say that, and I'm being a bit hard on bands, I know, but a lot of artists say that we are creative people, we don't want to be associated with a brand, we're like the creative part. Like if they're creative, they wouldn't be thinking about demos and like tours, right? That's not being creative at all. That's actually status quo. And going back to OK Go, I'll just use them as a concrete example of a band who completely made up something new as a way to get attention and get effectively make a career out of it. And I would just like to see tons more creativity, for want of a better request. That people actually pick a brand, look at what they value, understand that brand, understand their business, and create something that complements that brand. If they did that, I guarantee that brand would fall over themselves to give them money to do more of that kind of thing.
It's like what Chewy said earlier. If you have, if you're doing something innovative, and you're developing an organic, viral fan base online, and you use those metrics to go to a brand, or the brand sees that, then that's very desirable. Definitely.
Okay, I think we've covered everything. We've covered everything as far as people in the room are concerned anyway. If you don't have any more questions, so that's great. So just say thanks very much to Robert, to Paul, to Hazel, to Chewy. Thank you very much.